Pixel 10 has two main changes from Pixel 9. They are using a new chipset that for the first time is not made by Samsung Foundry but TSMC instead, and also they have a 3-camera setup instead of 2. On paper that sounds great, but in practice we should see if these changes are meaningful. I am Mo and I bought all of these 4 Pixel phones with my own money and I'll test everything about them today. The Pixel 7 here is the only phone with a 90Hz display. The other 3 can go up to 120Hz. The max brightness of the 4 phones increases generation by generation from 1000 nits on Pixel 7 to 1400 nits on Pixel 8 to 1800 nits on Pixel 9 and 2000 nits on Pixel 10. The resolution of phones is almost the same. Pixel 7 and 8 are both 1080 by 2400, while Pixel 9 and 10 are 1080 by 2424. Pixel 7, 9 and 10 are 6.3 inches, while the Pixel 8 is the only phone that is 6.3 inches. The Pixel 7 and 8 are Gorilla Glass Victus, while Pixel 9 and Pixel 10 are Victus 2. The Pixel 7 is 197 grams and it is taller than the rest. The Pixel 8 is 147 grams and they went in the direction of making the phone small in that generation. The Pixel 9 is 198 grams. It looks more like a modern phone with flat sides like the iPhone and new Galaxy phones. Pixel 10 is 204 grams, making it the heaviest Pixel phone here, and the design looks almost identical to Pixel 9 except for an extra camera in the camera bump. Most likely, the added weight is because of the new magnets inside of the phones and a slightly larger battery. Now you can attach Qi 2 accessories to Pixel 10 without the need for a case. To start the battery test, I played YouTube on Wi-Fi. All phones also have a 5G SIM card in them and are set to the same brightness using a lot meter. I'm also running the app that I wrote to measure the battery life, temperature, and signal strength. By the end of the test, all phones were around 92 to 94% battery left. They also had similar battery temperature except for Pixel 8, which was running a degree hotter. Then I turned the phones off and went out to take some pictures and videos. On mobile phones, there are two numbers that show how much light the camera gets, which directly impacts the background blur, the dynamic range, and also overall quality of the photo. One of them is sensor size and the other is f-stop, since the f-stop on phones is fixed. The f-stop on the Pixel 7 is 1.9, while the other three have a f-stop of 1.7. So far so good. But what is more important is the sensor size. The Pixel 7, 8 and 9 have a main camera with a sensor size of 1 to 1.31 inch, while the Pixel 10 main camera is 1 to 2 inch. That means the size of the sensor on the Pixel 10 is almost halved. You will hardly notice any difference though if you take a picture of nature in daylight. Even for architecture, it is not easy to tell which one is which. The same goes for food. All four phones have a very similar color profile and picture quality, but when the scene gets complex, I found the Pixel 10 not able to produce the same quality. For example, where the statue in the middle is too dark and contrasty. Another example is this photo with 3x zoom. Pixel 8 and Pixel 9 are doing a better job. The picture is sharper and there is more background blur. Also, the same observation here. The photo looks bright, but I took it in a very dark basement. Pixel 7 is a bit mushy, but Pixel 8 and 9 did a great job. Pixel 10 is a bit pixelated and noisy, and is trying to compensate for it by heavy denoising. But we should also not overstate the difference. It is usually very subtle and you have to pixel peep to find it. I found video is where the difference is more noticeable. For example, here if we zoom in, the Pixel 8 and Pixel 9 are showing more details and the leaves are separated, while on Pixel 10, the footage appears muddy. But overall, all phones are good at taking photos and videos, and also the color science stayed the same and there's a consistency between models. Also, the reason I'm removing Pixel 7 from the video comparison is because Adobe cannot decode the video from Pixel 7. Pixel 9 is the only phone with a zoom lens. It is a 5x telephoto one. Here the Pixel 7 is not looking great on 5x zoom, but Pixel 8 and 9 are doing a decent job. That said, the Pixel 10, of course, even better than that. In this indoor shot, it is the same story. The Pixel 10 5x zoom picture is more detailed. The main advantages for further zoom levels, for example, in this 8x zoom, you can see that Pixel 10 is much sharper. Also, with Pixel 10, you can zoom up to 25 times, while the others are capped at 8. That will let you take certain photos that won't be possible with the other three phones. The ultra-wide camera of the Pixel 10 is also downgraded, both in terms of pixel count and sensor size, but to be honest, for me it is almost impossible to tell the difference between them except for slight color differences. Even indoors in low light situations with pixel peeping, the quality is close, but let me know down in the comments if I'm not seeing things right. On video, it is also hard to tell the difference unless we really zoom in and start to pixel peep like crazy. Then you can see the background on the Pixel 10 is less detailed. Except for Pixel 7, the other three can also take up close macro shots, which is nice. The selfies are also close with very similar skin tone and the same consistency. We got back home and right now the Pixel 7 is the lowest at 58%, while Pixel 10 is the highest with 68%. I didn't use any of these phones as my personal phone and none of them have more than 20 to 30 charging cycles. But of course, the phone's batteries degrade over time, even if you are not using them. I then let all phones upload the pictures and video I took on Google Cloud. The phones are sporting Tensor G2 to G5. The Tensor G5 is made by TSMC and not Samsung Foundry. And what that often means is that the efficiency should be improved and the yield is higher. I ran Geekbench as the first test to check CPU performance. Not surprisingly, on single core, each generation had a slight improvement over the last one. The same goes for multi-core. Pixel 10 is around 25% more powerful than the Pixel 9, but it is still far behind other flagship phones. Then I ran the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme test to check GPU and gaming performance, and here again we see a very subtle increase generation by generation from Google, and we see a 21% increase from Pixel 9 to Pixel 10. To continue the battery test, I ran the game that I wrote myself, which is just a bunch of particles and cubes colliding while the FPS is capped at 30 frames per second. This way we make sure no phone is running extra frames and they're all under the same load. Then I disconnected all phones from Wi-Fi, so they are running on 5G, and I played YouTube again. For me, it is also important to see how the temperatures on the phones are by the end of the test. The Pixel 7 and 8 were both above 40 degrees Celsius, which is 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The Pixel 9 was cooler at 36.2 degrees Celsius, which is 97 degrees Fahrenheit, and Pixel 10 was similar at 35.8 degrees Celsius, which is 96 degrees Fahrenheit. So I wouldn't say there's a crazy amount of thermal and efficiency improvement here. Then I ran Google Meet on 5G for a while to drain the batteries further. It is not surprising that the phone that is oldest and also has the smallest battery capacity is going to zero first. I switched all phones back to Wi-Fi and kept them in the call while also playing YouTube in the background. Here the Pixel 8 is 3 degrees cooler than the Pixel 9 and 4 to 6 degrees cooler than the Pixel 7 and 8, and that's great news. Pixel 7 was the first to leave the chat after 4 hours and 70 minutes of heavy screen on time. There was a close battle between Pixel 8 and 9, which is very interesting. I did expect the Pixel 9 to last much longer since it does have a larger battery capacity, but surprisingly after 4 hours and 58 minutes, the Pixel 9 left the chat first. Just a couple of minutes later, Pixel 8 with 5 hours left the chat, and Pixel 10 was the last man standing. It continued the race alone for another 24 minutes and finally left the chat at 5 hours and 24 minutes, which is quite an improvement over the Pixel 9. Again, we should note the newer phone has a healthier battery, but still, it is great to see battery improvements in the new generation. So Pixel 10 is overall a mixed bag, and here is your too long didn't read version of what happened in the test. Let's start with the positives. The thermals are absolutely better. Sometimes it was 3 to 4 degrees Celsius lower than the other phones, especially compared to Pixel 7 and 8. The performance is improved. There are magnets, which is cool if you like to add accessories. The battery life is improved since the battery capacity is larger, and there's a telephoto lens so you can take better zoom pictures. But they also moved a bit backwards. While all manufacturers are trying to make phones lighter, they added a hefty weight to the phone and now it is over 200 grams. They nerfed the main camera and ultrawide, which is a shame, especially when the phone is around €1,000 or more. The performance is still mid-range phone level, so not really for gaming or video editing and video processing on the device. And that's why I assume the video quality is not that great. I would absolutely not upgrade from Pixel 9. In fact, if given the chance, I may even pick my Pixel 9 over Pixel 10. From Pixel 8 and Pixel 7, if you already have battery issues on your device and your device gets hotter and you have connection issues because of the crappy modem, then upgrading to Pixel 10 makes sense. You can also opt for something like Galaxy S25 if you want to see how the Pixel 10 compares to the Galaxy S25. You can watch this video next. Thanks for tuning in to Tecmo, and I will see you in the next one. I also almost forgot, if you want to buy the Pixel phone's Amazon edition, I'll put the link to the description down below.